Okay guys, this is going to be part 2 of our place training video series. We have Aspen the Samoyed here and one of our trainers, Seema, and they're going to be demonstrating the introduction of place with the electric collar. Again, if you have not done part 1 of our place training series, go back and do that. So as with everything with e-collar training, we are going to be combining the leash pressure and the e-collar together at the same time in the beginning, and everything is going to be on a conditioning level. So always we start at a lower level and just where the dog can barely perceive it, and we show him what the e-collar pressure means in the context of the place command. Because remember, just because you've done e-collar pressure for the recalls or the sit or the down or any of those other things doesn't mean he understands it in the context of place. So it's really important that anytime you're using the e-collar for something new, you go down to this conditioning level and you do some conditioning exercises, even if it's just a few, to make sure that the dog is comfortable with the behavior. So we're going to be giving the command at the same time as giving the command. We're going to start using the e-collar and asking the dog to place. And we want the dog to hold the place and break. And the second he's able to do it successfully, immediately he comes off. So now we're going to do it again. Combo, e-collar, and there you go. And she guides him with the leash. And you can see there his foot is off. And with him, we put this place outside because he's never done it outside. So we're assuming that there's going to be some difficulty here, which is good. We want to prove that not only prove the behavior, but show you guys, with realistic scenarios, not always dogs that are cooperating, but sometimes dogs that don't cooperate, what it is that's involved in creating reliability in the behavior. So you can see that the dog is really not wanting to hold the position, so we're just taking him through many reps. Good. And he's not a food dog, so we're just rewarding by giving him the break signal and praising him and petting him, and now having him go back.
Good place. Good boy.
And you can see here that the dog is perceiving the e-collar, but he really doesn't have any problem with it. Like he's constantly breaking the position and so on and so forth. And this is an important step, right? We don't want to, the temptation is to escalate right away. I want to make sure before I ever escalate on the collar that the dog is 100% clear on what the desired expectation is. And then if he on his own, chooses to still come off the bed, then it's okay. It's fair to make a consequence on him. So before I ever escalate on the e-collar, we go through a session or two like this where the dog really understands what it is that we're asking. So now have him go on the place. Make a little more distance.
Good place.
Good, and move around a little bit. It's okay if he comes off. She's going to mark with the and the addition of the e-collar until the dog goes back. If necessary, she'll guide the dog back on with the leash. So instead now of the pinch collar making the pressure on the dog when he doesn't do the right thing, we're using the e-collar as the pressure device. Good, and now you can break him. And again, if she says break and he doesn't come off, that's something where we enforce that. Again, it's not a correction because it's such a low level, but we're really being super clear with him that break means you can come off. Don't come off until you hear that command. That break signal is so important. Good. And stand away from him again. And you can see now that he's gone through a few repetitions. The dog is fairly clear on what the desired expectation is. He's a bit of a mule to train, this dog, so you're not going to see the same eagerness that you might see from a more food motivated dog or a dog that's a little bit more biddable, but that's okay. I mean, usually the place training with dogs like this is even more important than with those types of dogs. All right, break. There you go. And now you can see he accepts the break signal a lot better. He's paying a bit more attention. All right, send him back to the place. Good. Good. And now really go as far away from him as that will allow you. There you go. And again, super clear for the dog what the desired expectation is. He must wait until he receives the release. And again, having the place outside for him is a big thing because we've never done it. It's always been inside. The place is in the house. So, you know, usually when we practice this, we practice inside, but there's nothing wrong with doing it outside because there are numerous occasions. And there's the correction. There are numerous occasions in which you might need to use the place outside. So when, for example, when I go camping, I always bring the place with me. You know, when we are RVing or something, I always have the place with me. Or I use the picnic table that's provided at the site as a place. The place is whatever it is that I say that it is. So now what we're going to do, break them. Now what we're going to do, for the sake of the video, is we are going to escalate. Because this isn't the first time he's done place. It's the first time outside, which is why he's less compliant. But that's okay. I feel comfortable escalating with him on the e-collar based on what I'm seeing. So you're going to escalate a little bit now. Okay. I want it to go from perceptible to uncomfortable. And you're still going to preset him just because he's being a little bit difficult about it. We're still going to give the stim before the command. Okay? And we're going to put him, or sorry, at the same time as the command. As if it's conditioning, but on a little bit of a higher level. This is something what I do with dogs that are a little bit more stubborn. Okay, it's okay. Make it a little higher then. Break him. Break. Let's check that level and turn it up a little bit. I don't see any perception from the dog. Let's do that again. There we go. And now go away from him. There we go. And now we're going to see if he comes off. You're going to see how the e-collar affects the behavior. You want to see that the dog goes back on. Good. And for those of you wondering, why isn't he lying down, sitting? Look, he's outside. He's expecting to come off. Once he settles down, we're going to break him. So I'm going to wait for that moment where he just kind of goes into a state of a little bit of relaxation. He stops being so expectant, you know, of whatever it is that's going on in the background of him getting off. And if he does, then there's going to be a consequence. Yeah, he held himself there. Good job, Aspen. Good. And there'll be a moment. And we're going to wait. You can move around a little more to see if you can tempt him. And it's okay, you know, in the training, people always avoid problems. They're always like, no, I don't want the dog to come off. No, it's okay, let him come off. That's fine. That's all part of the learning process, is the dog coming off. So this is the mid stage. And again, this is not something where I do over like 10 sessions. This is something that happens relatively quickly. For me, place command is one of the easiest things to train. And the dog perceives it and understands it really fast. Hey, Serena, walk your dog close by. Any distraction, we take opportunity. So there you go. He sees that dog. And if he comes off, it's okay. Closer, Serena. And let's do it again. Wait. There you go. And go away again. And walk your dog around.
Oh boy.
Good. There we go. And of course, everything is in combination with the leash. We're not using the e-collar by itself yet because he's not ready for that. He was ready for a little bit of a higher level on the e-collar. Go to him and break him now, Seema.
Break.
Good. Okay, guys, so after you've completed those steps, what we're going to do is we're just going to give the command, and if the dog doesn't go to the bed, then we're going to bump the dog on the e-collar until he's on the bed, and then we're just going to hold him accountable to the bed with the e-collar. So Seema, why don't you give him the command? So drop the leash. So now we're going to kind of make believe that it's a home environment, and she's dropping the leash, and drop the leash. There we go. And now as she moves away from the dog, if he comes off, she's still going to mark, and she's going to immediately put him back on the bed. Just fix the leash. It's over his head there. Thank you. All right, good. All right, so will you guys all move past the dog? I don't care if he comes off. It's all good. Right? So you can see if he makes a mistake, if he decides that he wants to come off to go visiting, you know, if he comes off to go see somebody, go knock on the door maybe, Seema. That's good. A lot of dogs, they just have an automatic response to that stimulation of the sound of the door being knocked on. If you're at home, you practice this and you prove this by knocking on your door. You ring your doorbell, maybe even fake answer the door. Maybe knock on the door, Seema, and then like pretend to answer it, just so people get an idea of what I'm talking about. Because most dogs are really bad with the door, right?
Hey, how are you?
Literally, you do that. And I guarantee you your dog will break the place at your house because they're expecting somebody to come in and they have all this built up arousal around that whole event. So you need to proof this behavior at home. Don't just do place in a quiet. So right away he made the mistake. Just goes, collects the leash, and just as if he was wearing a pinch collar, does the exact same thing. Drop the lead. Now, of course, if he breaks again, we're going to escalate the level of the e-collar. And there's going to be progressive escalation on the e-collar until the dog shows that, you know, he's willing to hold the position. Again, it's a relatively new command for him still. Place is probably the fastest progression for me. But I always make sure that before I progress the dog, the most important thing is to make sure that the dog has been conditioned properly on the e-collar for the recall. And then I introduce the place in this context. So the first thing that I do with the e-collar is not the place command. Good, and now you can break him. Good. And you notice again, she's usually going back to the dog for the break. Why don't you put him back on there? Good. And because he didn't go right away, drop the lead. Now, can you just, Stephen, just bring your dog around there, right over there, and play with him a little bit and see if we can. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Excellent. Go back to him, break him, and we're done. So you guys can see the progression. So in the beginning, we start, just to recap, we start with the e-collar conditioning. Just conditioning the dog to go on the place on a barely perceptible level. Then you can escalate a little bit if the dog is breaking. Then once you're there, what you're going to do is you're going to make the command first, and then only bump the dog on the e-collar if he doesn't go on the bed. And then if the dog comes off the bed, you're going to mark with the you're going to go grab the leash as you continue to bump on the collar. The instant his paw comes off the bed, you are going to start bumping. Bump, 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 bump. At the same time as you say you're going to go collect the dog, and you're going to escort him back to the bed very firmly with that bumping continuously until he's on the bed. Or if you bump him and he runs back to the bed on his own, immediately, of course, you're going to stop. So this is the progression. In terms of level, listen, as long as you've conditioned it properly, and I always say this because there's always somebody who doesn't condition it properly, who's lazy, who skips steps, and hasn't made sure that the dog properly understands it, that actually creates aversion to the place. And the way that they do that is by going too fast, using a high level. The dog comes off, they blast him on a high level, and then the dog actually makes the association, because maybe their timing's a little off, with the place and a high level on the e-collar, and of course then he doesn't want to go on. And the solution to that, if you've already done that and screwed things up, is go back and do the conditioning with the leash in your hand. Don't do this without a leash. Okay, I can't stress that enough. And then you're going to have a dog who really understands the place and understands that the e-collar actually turns off on the place, not because of the place. And that's where people make suspicious associations by doing the training improperly. So the conditioning is so important. Do not skip the conditioning. And now put him back on, and then Serena, maybe you can play with your dog a little bit next to the place.
Okay.
And stand away. Seema, Serena, just play like rough with him if you can. A little closer. A little closer. There you go. Good. Good. And he's holding it very well, and I think that's good enough for the current session. So now break. Very good. So you guys can see that first we did the conditioning. We ensured, we're going back to the loose leash walking here because Mr. Samoyed seems to be particularly interested in that side-by-side, so we're going to have to run him around some of those vehicles and make sure that he's good with that. So we introduced him first to the concept of the place command with the leash, of course, and the prong collar. Then from there, we moved on to conditioning him with the e-collar. Again, for me, probably the conditioning for place is the shortest amount of conditioning I'll ever really do, because it's such an easy concept. And once you've already introduced the e-collar and other concepts, the dogs generally are pretty good with it. So it's important, guys, to understand you still spend that time. You make sure that the dog is perceiving it properly. As you could see, he understood it. He wasn't being particularly compliant, but he did understand it. And then when we escalated on him a little bit, he became a lot more correct with the behavior. Later on, we're going to talk about how to send your dog from a distance to the place command. All right, that'll be a whole nother thing, and we'll talk about how to do that in another session. But this is the intermediate step, and this is, even if you don't ever want to progress farther than this is going to give you a dog that, it becomes very reliable on the place command.